Morning, my son-in-law showed up at my front door with a moving truck and a smirk on his face. I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking coffee and reading the paper, just like any other Tuesday. He didn't knock. He just walked around to the side of the house and started measuring the fence line with a tape measure, like he already owned the place. I watched him through the window for a moment. Then I set my mug down, folded the paper, and went outside. "Something I can help you with, Darren?" He looked up at me with that smile he'd been wearing for the past 2 years, the one that never quite reached his eyes. "Just getting a feel for the property, Irving. Won't be long now." I didn't say anything. I just went back inside and picked up my phone. "I want to tell you everything from the beginning, because if I start from that morning, you won't understand why I wasn't afraid. And that's the part that matters. My name is Irving Sloan. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a forensic accountant, the last 14 of those as a senior investigator with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division out of the Dallas field office. I've put away tax cheats, money launderers, shell company operators, and one particularly creative orthodontist who was running a cash skimming operation out of 3 different practices in the DFW area. I've testified in federal court more times than I can count. I know how people hide money. I know how they move it. And I know better than most that paper trails don't lie. People do." I retired 4 years ago when my wife Lorraine was diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's. We'd been married 42 years. The plan was always that I'd stop traveling, stop working crazy hours, and we'd spend whatever time we had left together at the house in Colleyville. The house we'd bought in 1998, paid off in 2019, and spent the better part of 2 decades making into a home. Lorraine passed 14 months ago, February, quiet and peaceful, in her own bed, the way she always said she wanted. I held her hand. I'm grateful for that much. Our daughter, Melissa, our only child, flew in for the funeral. She brought Darren. She always brought Darren. She always brought Darren. They'd been married 6 years at that point. I never fully warmed to him, but I kept my mouth shut about it. Lorraine could read people the way I read spreadsheets, and she'd told me once, quietly, that there was something off about his relationship with money. "He spends like someone else is going to pay," she said. I filed that away. After the funeral, Melissa sat me down and said she was worried about me being alone. She asked if she and Darren could come stay with me for a few weeks, just to help me get settled. I said yes. Of course I said yes. Of course I said yes. I'd just buried my wife. The few weeks turned into 6 months, and somewhere in those 6 months, the dynamics shifted in a way I didn't fully notice until it was already done. Darren worked in real estate development, or so he said. The truth, which I'd eventually come to understand, was that he had a talent for being adjacent to deals without ever being responsible for them when they went sideways. He knew terminology. He knew how to sound authoritative in a room. What he didn't have was a license, a consistent income, or anything resembling a track record. But he had ideas. He always had ideas. About 3 months into their stay, he started talking about the house, specifically about how much it was worth. Colleyville had gone up considerably since we bought it, and about how it was just sitting there, generating no return. He started using phrases like unlocking equity and leveraging the asset and positioning for the next phase. I listened. I didn't engage. I know the difference between a pitch and a conversation, and that was always a pitch. Then Melissa started in, more gently, but the same direction. She'd bring me articles about reverse mortgages, about seniors downsizing, about assisted living communities. "Dad, you have to think about the future." She'd say it with her hand on my arm and a look of genuine concern on her face, and I want to tell you that confused me more than anything else, because I couldn't tell for the longest time where her actual worry for me ended and his influence began. I kept saying I wasn't interested in selling. The house was mine, it was paid for, and it was the last place Lorraine had lived. I wasn't going anywhere. That's when things got quieter, and I should have known that was worse. I had a handyman who'd worked for me for years. A guy named Bud, retired Air Force, completely reliable. About 4 months in, Bud mentioned to me in passing that he'd seen a locksmith's van at the house one afternoon when I was at a doctor's appointment. Said it was there for about an hour. I didn't say anything to Melissa or Darren about it. I just went to the hardware store the next day and had both the front and back door locks changed myself. Put the new keys on a separate ring I kept in my truck. A week after that, I drove to see my attorney, a woman named Carol Hutchins who'd handled our estate planning. I told her what was happening. The pressure to sell, the locksmith, the general atmosphere in the house. She listened carefully. Then she said, "Irving, I want you to go home and look for your deed and your estate documents. All of them. And then bring them to me." They were gone. The originals I'd kept in the fireproof box in the closet. The deed to the house, Lorraine's will, our joint trust documents, all of it. The box was still there. The papers inside it were not. I sat down on the edge of the bed and I thought about that for a long time. Then I got in my truck and drove back to Carol's office. She made copies of everything she had on file. Then she picked up the phone and called a colleague of hers, a man named Vincent Aderora, who specialized in elder financial abuse cases. He'd worked with the Texas Attorney General's office for years and had recently gone into private practice. Carol said, "Irving's going to need you." I shook Vincent's hand and he looked at me across the conference table and said, "Tell me everything." So I did. Over the next 3 weeks, I learned that Darren had done his homework. He'd found a notary, a man named Lou, who operated out of a mailbox store in Grapevine, who was, to put it politely, flexible about the requirements of his position, specifically about the requirement that the person granting a power of attorney be physically present, mentally competent, and not under any form of duress. What Lou had notarized was a document that gave Darren and Melissa joint power of attorney over my financial affairs and real property. My signature on it was, "I'll give them this, a reasonable forgery. Not perfect, but reasonable." They had also, sometime in those months, gotten a copy of my social security number, my bank account information, and the account number for the home equity line of credit I'd opened years ago and never fully drawn on. What they had not done, and this is where 31 years of forensic work is worth something, was cover their tracks. Vincent found the trail in about 10 days. The notary's records. A real estate attorney in Fort Worth who'd been contacted about beginning the process of a property transfer, a savings account in Melissa's name alone, not joint, not with Darren, Melissa's alone, that had received 2 wire transfers totaling $34,000 from my HELOC in the previous 6 weeks. Darren had been smart enough not to put it in his own name. He hadn't been smart enough to realize that didn't matter. I want to stop here for a moment because people always ask me what I felt when I found all of this out. And I tell them the truth. I didn't feel what you'd expect. I didn't feel what you'd expect. I didn't feel rage. I felt something colder than that. I felt the particular clarity that comes from a problem being named. For months, I'd been living in a fog of suspicion and second-guessing, wondering if I was being paranoid, wondering if I was just a grieving old man who didn't understand what his family was trying to do for him. And then suddenly the fog lifted and there it was, a fraud. A clean, documentable, prosecutable fraud. I knew exactly what that was. I'd been dismantling frauds for 3 decades. This one just had my daughter's name on it. That part I did not put in a spreadsheet. That part I took a long drive with, down through the hill country on a Wednesday afternoon, windows down, radio off. Then I came back and got to work. We let it run another 2 weeks. Vincent needed time to pull together a complete picture, and the Texas AG's Elder Fraud Unit, who Vincent had already looped in, wanted enough to act decisively. I went home and behaved normally. I had dinners with Melissa. I let Darren talk about his development projects. I asked questions and nodded in the right places and gave nothing away. I'm not proud of all of it. Looking across the dinner table at my daughter and pretending I didn't know what I knew, That required something I didn't know I had. Or maybe I'd always had it and just never had cause to use it that way. One evening, Melissa sat down next to me on the porch while Darren was on a call inside. She put her head on my shoulder the way she used to do when she was small, and she said, "Dad, I just want you to be okay. I worry about you." I put my arm around her. I said, "I know you do, sweetheart." I don't know what she actually believed in those moments. I've thought about it a great deal. I don't have a clean answer. The morning the investigators came, it was a Thursday. 7:45 in the morning, two plainclothes officers from the AG's Elder Ford unit and a Tarrant County Sheriff's deputy, along with Vincent and Carol. I'd known they were coming. I was dressed and had coffee ready. Melissa came downstairs in her robe and stopped at the bottom of the stairs when she saw the people in the living room. She looked at me. I looked back at her. Darren came down 2 minutes later. He was already on his phone. He was always on his phone in the mornings. He got to the doorway of the living room, saw the badges, and the phone dropped about 6 inches before he caught it. The lead investigator, a quiet woman who introduced herself as Agent Flores, asked them both to have a seat. She explained what they'd found. She explained what charges were being considered. She was calm and professional and not unkind about it. Darren's first instinct was to look at me. His second instinct was to talk. "Irving, look, this is a misunderstanding. We were trying to protect your assets. We can explain the transfers. Mr. Sloan," Agent Flores said, and it took Darren a moment to realize she wasn't talking to him. She was talking to me. "Is there anything you'd like to say at this time?" I thought about it. Then I said, "I'd just like the house key back, please." I wanted to walk through every detail of the legal process because it took 14 months and most of it was not dramatic. What I will tell you is the shape of it. Darren was charged at elder financial abuse, forgery, and wire fraud under Texas law. The wire fraud charge triggered a parallel federal investigation, given that the HELOC transfers crossed state banking infrastructure, and at that point a prosecutor I'd never met became very interested in Darren's broader financial history. That investigation uncovered 2 previous incidents, one in Nevada, one in Colorado, where similar patterns had appeared around elderly relatives of former partners. Neither had resulted in charges. This one did. Lou the notary lost his commission and faced his own set of charges. He cooperated. Cooperation is interesting that way. It tends to reveal a great deal about the person you're cooperating against. Darren pled guilty to the state charges and received 4 years with a federal plea agreement running concurrently that added supervised release conditions and restitution. The $34,000 was recovered. Most of it, Melissa. This is the part people always want me to get to. She was charged. I want to be honest about that. She was charged as a co-conspirator, and the evidence supported it. The account was in her name. She had signed the POA document, and there were text messages between her and Darren that made her awareness of the plan difficult to dispute. Her attorney argued, and I believe not without some basis, that she had been manipulated by Darren over a period of years, that the account in her name was there specifically so that if anything went wrong, she would be the one holding the most exposure. There's a particular kind of person who structures arrangements that way, and Darren was exactly that kind of person. She accepted a plea agreement, 18 months probation, a fine, 200 hours of community service, and full cooperation with the federal investigation into Darren's prior conduct. I did not attend any of the hearings. I couldn't. She called me once, about 2 months after everything concluded. It was a short call. She apologized. I said I heard her. She asked if I thought we could ever, and I said I didn't know. I said I needed time. That's still where we are. I want to say something about the house because that's what it was really about, and I think it deserves a proper ending. The house in Colleyville is still mine. I am sitting in it right now, at the same kitchen table where I was sitting that Tuesday morning when Darren walked around the fence line like he was taking inventory. I put new locks on all the doors. I updated my estate documents. Carol set up a proper trust structure that makes what Darren tried to do essentially impossible. The kind of layered protection I should have had from the start, but didn't because I never imagined I'd need it from the people I did. Bud came back to finish the portrailing he'd started before all of this happened. We got it done in the afternoon. He didn't say much about what had happened. He's not that kind of man. But when we were packing up the tools, he said, "Place looks good, Irving." And I knew what he meant. There are mornings now when I come downstairs and the quiet is just quiet, not lonely. Though it was for a long time. Just quiet the way a house gets when it belongs to you fully, when there's nothing in it that isn't yours. Lorraine's photographs are still on the sideboard. Her reading chair is still by the window, with a blanket folded over the arm, because I've never moved it, and I'm not going to. This was her home. It was our home, and for a period of time, a period that felt much longer than it was, someone who should have loved me tried to take it from me. They didn't get it. I want to be clear about that. They didn't get it. Because I knew what they were doing before they finished doing it, and because I had spent a career understanding exactly how people try to take things that don't belong to them. I am 67 years old. I have buried my wife. I have watched my daughter make choices I will never fully understand. I still drink my coffee at this table in the morning. I still read the paper. And I am still here, in this house, where I intend to remain for as long as I can manage it. That's the whole story. People ask me what the hardest part was. They expect me to say it was finding out about the forged documents, or sitting across the dinner table from my daughter for 3 weeks knowing what I knew, and those things were hard. I won't pretend otherwise. But the hardest part was simpler than that. It was the moment I had to stop asking myself whether I had done something to deserve it. That's the question that gets you, not the betrayal itself, but the hours you spend turning it over, looking for your own fingerprints on it. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe I gave too little. Maybe I trusted too easily because I wanted to believe the best of the people I loved, and that wanting made me careless. I went around that loop more times than I care to admit. What I eventually landed on wasn't an answer so much as a recognition. There is a difference between a mistake you make and a choice someone else makes. Darren chose to forge a signature. He chose to find a notary willing to look the other way. He chose to wire money out of an account that wasn't his. Those were his choices, made over months, deliberately and with full knowledge of what he was doing. I could examine my own conduct for the rest of my life and never find anything that caused those choices. They came from inside him. That's where they lived long before he ever walked into my daughter's life. The thing about dishonesty, real calculated dishonesty, is that it requires a person to have already decided that other people are simply resources, not relationships, not family, not people with histories and losses and feelings, just resources to be positioned and used. Once someone has made that decision about you, there is almost nothing you could have done differently that would have changed the outcome. The target shifts, maybe. The method adjusts. But the intention was always there. What I could control was what I did when I saw it clearly, and that's where I think about the 31 years, not as a credential, not as something that made me special, but as a discipline. Forensic work teaches you to stay calm when the picture is ugly, because panic is the enemy of accuracy. It teaches you to document before you act, to understand the full shape of something before you try to dismantle it. It teaches you, above everything else, that the truth is always in the details, and that people who are lying always leave details behind. I used every bit of that. Not because I'm exceptional, but because I had spent decades building it, one case at a time. And it was there when I needed it. That's what I want people to take from this. Not that you need a 30-year career in federal investigations to protect yourself. You don't. What you need is to pay attention, to trust the part of yourself that notices when something is off, to get the right people on your side early, before the situation forces your hand. Carol saw it before I fully named it. Vincent knew exactly what to do the moment I laid it out. I didn't do this alone. No one does anything alone that matters. Lorraine used to say that character is just habit, made consistent. You practice honesty until it's automatic. You practice patience until it's your first response instead of your last. And the inverse is also true. You practice self-deception, practice treating people as means to an end. And eventually that's all you know how to do. Darren had practiced for a long time. So had I. We both got what we'd built. The house is still mine. The coffee is still good in the morning, and I am still here.